We have just heard well, before I start, I just want to thank my brass down there, and the bells, and baby Jesus and the gang for participating in worship. It really does make it a special evening when we can have these special things going on, and I do want to thank them for their wonderful gifts that they've given to us tonight, and to God, allowing us to enjoy them. We have just heard the most powerful story ever heard, if you will. We hear it year in and year out. We've heard it over the centuries. Not just the story of the birth of Jesus Christ in the manger, but the entire story of Scripture, the story that begins with the creation, God's creation of the whole world, that He might pour out His love upon something other than Himself. And then we've also heard about the Garden of Eden, where they rebelled against God and they did what God asked them not to do, and how we fall out of favor with God, and how we've separated ourselves from God, and how all of us, each of us, have inherited that. And the rest of Scripture is filled with God continuing to reach down and seeking us, trying to reestablish that relationship, which He ultimately did through the gift of His Son Jesus Christ, through the birth of His Son Jesus Christ. We hear this story year in and year out. And my question tonight on this eve of Christmas, this Christmas Eve, is what difference does it really make? What difference does that story really make? We still see poverty and suffering. I'm sure that you've got a chance to see the news and the busyness of your Christmas shopping and the busyness of your day-to-day goings-on, and you know that we still are at war. There's several of us here who are in the military. I'm still the chaplain for the 108th Area Fuel and Wing. We have a young man in uniform here this morning up front, George Weisgerber III. And we're still a nation at war. And it's not just us. We can look at other places around the world where war goes on that we're not involved in at this point in time. We still see families being destroyed by dysfunction. Families that are at each other's throats and abuses. Every now and again we'll get a phone call at the church, and it'll be usually a woman who has escaped her husband, who has been beating her and has taken her children with her, and is looking for a place to stay, a roof over her head, while she's finding a shelter that she can go to. I wish I could tell you that only happens once in a great while, but what I can tell you that it does happen once in a while. We still see all of these things going on after centuries of this story being told. And so I ask again, what difference does this story really make? What difference does it make? This morning, I was looking at some articles that I received on the computer, but it's from a magazine, Sojourners Magazine, and one of them caught my eye. I want to read that to you tonight and think about what I just said to you and listen to this story. It's called Christmas in the Trenches. It was first published in Sojourners in 2002, and they continue to publish it every Christmas, year in and year out. They kind of call it their own version of Charlie Brown's Christmas special. It keeps on coming. Silent Night, by a man named Stanley Weintraub, is the story of a Christmas Eve, 1914, on the World War I battlefield in Flanders, as the German, British, and French troops facing each other were settling in for the night. It's a true story. A young German soldier began to sing Silent Night in German. Others joined in. When they had finished, the British and the French responded with other Christmas carols. Eventually, the men from both sides left their trenches and met in the middle. They shook hands, exchanged gifts, and shared pictures of their families. Informal soccer games began in what had been no man's land. Keep in mind, this is a true story. And a joint service was held to bury the dead on both sides. The generals, of course, were not pleased with these events. Men who have come to know each other's names and seen each other's families are much less likely to want to kill each other. War seems to require a nameless and faceless enemy. So following that magical night, the men on both sides spent a few days simply firing aimlessly into the sky.